You can become extremely wealthy by mastering this one simple technique that professional traders from all over the globe are using to make a fortune. And this simple technique that I'm talking about is properly drawing support and resistance areas to successfully identify areas of supply and demand. And in this video, I'm going to show you the complete blueprint and lay out the exact criteria that we use here at Market Makers University to identify the highest probability support and resistance areas. So if you're someone who wants to take your trading to the next level and you find this type of content useful, then subscribe to the channel because we're always constantly putting out new content just like this to help you in your trading journey. That being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first question we need to ask ourselves is, what exactly is a support and resistance area? Or in other words, what defines a support and resistance zone? Essentially, all it is, in a nutshell, it's just simply an area somewhere on your chart where the price has reacted in the past and it might have a probability of reacting in that same area again in the future. And the reason why we draw these support and resistance areas is simply to remind ourselves to look at these areas when the price inevitably reaches that area in the future and might have a probability of eventually reacting at that area again. Notice the zone I created on the first high or the first low, and it eventually reacted in the same area, eventually reacted in the same area, eventually reacted in the same area, and eventually reacted in the same area, and eventually reacted in the same area over here and over here. And I'm going to give you every single criteria that we use in order to find these sweet spots where the market might react. And before I get into that, I'm going to actually give you some bonus tips. I'm going to give you some pro tips on what you can do whenever you're drawing these zones. The first pro tip I'm going to give you is whenever you're drawing any support and resistance zone, I see a lot of people when they draw these zones, they would draw it just like this, and they end the zone essentially where the tops have stopped. But a key point is the reason why we're drawing these zones is because it might be a potential area where the market might react in the future. So that being said, what must we do to this zone? Very important. We must extend this all the way to the right. We must extend this to the future because, again, we're using that as a reference point of where the market might react in the future. It's very, very, very important. So whenever you draw these zones, you always want to make sure you're always extending these to the right. You don't want to stop it right here when the market is reacting. You always want to extend it to the future in case the market does approach that area, and that serves as a reminder to look at that area again. Now, the second thing is, I see a lot of people, especially on YouTube, teaching whenever they're drawing these support and resistance zones, they're drawing them as lines. Do not draw these zones as lines. These are not lines. These are considered zones. These are considered areas. So I've seen people on YouTube, they go here, they go to this horizontal tool, or they do Command H or Option H, and they simply put these lines on their chart as support and resistance lines. That is the wrong way to do it, because whenever you're looking at support and resistance areas or zones, the price isn't going to simply bounce off at this exact pip, at this exact wick that you see here. It has a probability of bouncing off in the rough area of where the price reacted before. That is why you must draw them as zones and not lines. And what I use for that is I use the rectangle tool. So you simply come over here, get the rectangle tool, select that, and then you can draw the zone. Now, how to draw these zones, before I get into the criteria, the third tip I'm going to give you is how we draw these zones is we want to try to encapsulate all of the wicks, all of the areas where you see the wicks, and we also want to try to avoid as much of the bodies as possible. We want to try to avoid as many bodies. We want to try to capture or encapsulate as much wicks as we can. So how thick we draw these zones is try to capture the top of the wick and try to avoid the bodies as best as possible. Try to capture this wick. Yes, it did end up capturing the body a little bit, but I'm trying to capture these wicks over here as well. So extend this a little bit higher, make sure you try to capture all the wicks, and you try to want to avoid capturing the bodies. Same thing here. I avoided this body. I inevitably had to capture some of these bodies here, but I made sure I extended it low enough to hit the tip of these wicks over here. Same exact concept over here. So in order to draw this zone, you want to try to capture as much of the wicks as possible without getting as much of the bodies. You're never going to have zones that are perfectly clean and all perfect and by the book, like a textbook example, but just try to do the best you can. The more often you do this, the better and better and better you'll end up getting. But the main concept is, and this is the fourth tip I'll give you, is you want to just attempt to make these zones as thin as you can in a nutshell. Because these are the areas where we will be entering and exiting trades if the price approaches these areas in the future. Now that we have the basics out of the way, let's talk about the 6 criteria that we use in order to find these high probability zones. The first criteria we're going to be talking about is finding these levels at the swing highs and the swing lows. We want to be finding these levels at the most recent swing highs and the most recent extreme swing lows. So let's do an example on Euro CAD. So here we are at the current day on Euro CAD, and let's figure out where we see the most extreme highs. So the 2 extreme highs that you see on this chart right now are right here, and the extreme lows that you see on this chart are right here. So these would be the most clean, the highest probability zones where the market is creating a support and resistance area. Here, the price is resisting to go any further up. So this would be considered a resistance area. This bottom one right here, it's acting as a support because the market is having trouble breaching this zone down here, and it has reacted and rejected this bottom area twice. Same exact concept as what it did over here. So top one is a resistance, the bottom one is a support. The cleanest way to draw these, the most highest probability ones, are simply at the extreme lows and the extreme highs. So whenever you see extreme lows and extremes high like these, always be sure to identify those as support and resistance areas. Looking at something like this, even though it is a high, it isn't an extreme high. It isn't the most relative high based on what you see in the chart. So you could draw this as a zone, but it won't be as effective. The ones that are more effective are at the very top or the very bottom. And let's do an example on EJ. This is Euro JPY. I'm currently on the 1-hour chart. Same exact concept here. There are zones, there are tops and bottoms and areas in the middle, but the easiest and most effective ones would be at the extreme highs and the extreme lows. So this would be considered an extreme high. What am I doing? I'm trying to capture as many of these wicks as possible while still attempting to make this zone as thin as I possibly can. And this is the extreme high, and this would be considered the extreme low. What am I doing here? Same exact concept. I'm trying to capture as many of the entirety of the wicks as possible while trying to minimize the amount of candles that I'm actually capturing. You want to minimize the actual bodies. You want to maximize the actual wicks. So some of you might be thinking these zones are pretty thick. But one thing we have to take into consideration, we are currently on the 1-hour chart. So if I take my little measuring tool right here and measure this zone, this support and resistance area is only 15 pips deep. What about this one? Same exact concept, 17, around 20 pips deep. So it's not that wide. It's simply because I'm on the 1-hour chart that it looks that way. So make sure you try to draw these zones as thin as you possibly can while still trying to capture all of the wicks while trying to avoid the bodies. The simplest and cleanest zones, as you see here, are simply the ones at the extreme lows and the extreme highs. Because the reality is, if you were able to successfully identify these wicks right here as a support area, once the price inevitably came back, this could have been a great area for an entry for a buy. And this would have been the perfect entry for a sell. Now, moving on to the second criteria, you want to find an area where you have the most amount of rejections. The more areas of rejection that you have, the stronger that support or resistance zone is going to be held. An example that I see right here is that what we're looking at right now, Euro JPY, this was held once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, and the 8th time was the rejection for your buy. Let me give you another example. We can do GBP JPY. Looking at this price action over here, same exact concept. How many times was this zone rejected at? Once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, and 8 times. If you can identify areas where the market has reacted at a specific level numerous times, you know that is a level where professional traders are eyeing at in the future. Now, moving on to the third criteria, and this is super important, you want to be able to identify areas that are extremely clean, areas that are obvious, and areas of support and resistance that jumps out at you very easily. You don't want to try to find any obscure zones that you might see as special areas that the price might react. The easier, the more obvious, the more clean it is, the higher chance that that area will actually hold. So let's talk about an example. So right now we are currently on Euro GBP. So let me give you examples of zones that are clean and zones that are probably not too clean. So this top zone right here, the price reacted, the price reacted, the price reacted, and we can see the price wicked up, touched it, and then plummeted. In other words, reacted. There's no question that anyone that looks at this area is a clean zone. Same exact concept for right over here. The price reacted multiple times. This is a very clean zone. Even though we had a false break, this is still a clean zone because it was respected multiple times. Let's talk about something that's not too clean. This zone right here, price reacted, price reacted, price reacted. If you wanted to make it a little bit thicker, price reacted. I wouldn't really consider this a clean zone. Yes, the price is somewhat reacting on it, but it is not clean at all. And let's talk about another zone over here as well. If you look at this area, the price reacted multiple times. The price wicked off. The price is wicking occasionally through this, but this is not a clean zone. Yes, if you do this area, you could have some wins here and there. I really don't see too many besides, I guess, this one here. Maybe this small wick if you had a small quick trade on the 1 hour chart, and maybe this trade over here. But most of these trades are going to get you stopped out. This is not a clean zone whatsoever. So the zone I wouldn't draw is this one. Really wouldn't draw this one either. This would be the only clean zone, and this would be the only clean zone on this chart right now. Now, I know a lot of people have a lot of trouble with this specific criteria. A lot of people always ask me, are these zones clean? Am I drawing this zone right? So let me give you another example so I can really drill this in and give you multiple examples of me drawing these zones to give you a better idea of like how these look. So we will go ahead and go into GBP NZD. Let's go to the daily time frame and let's go ahead and talk about some zones. So right here, the zones I would say are the cleanest would be this zone right over here. And by the way, guys, what I'm doing right now with my eyes, I have my cursor on the left and I'm just kind of looking at this whole x-axis. I'm looking at the dotted line to see where I should start my box where the price has reacted in multiple areas. So right here is where I would start the zone. I would draw this just like this. This zone was breached a little bit, but I want to try to encapsulate as many of these wicks as possible while still trying to attempt to keep this as thin as possible. And then the next one I see here, I'm going to start this zone at this green wick, at the edge of that wick, because that's the highest point that the price went to on this day. On that day, this is the highest price that the price went to. That's where I'm going to start my zone. Obviously, I'm going to capture this top wick over here as well. And I'm going to capture the top of this zone over here as well. The next clean, obvious zone that I see here is just right here at these support areas over here. And this last clean zone I see on GBP NZD, is right over here. Notice the price action has been reacting or rejecting at this zone countless times. And now this zone has turned into a support and is being reacted at multiple times. And now it returned to resistance again where my mouse is, reacting, and then turned into a support, reacting multiple times. I'm wanting to keep this zone as thin as possible while still trying to capture as many wicks as I can. and then also trying to avoid as much of the bodies as I can as possible. So this is how you draw this zone. Now, to fully make sure you guys truly understand this, let's talk about the opposite. Let's talk about the other end of the spectrum. What are zones that are not clean? I would say this right here, this really isn't too clean of a zone. Yes, the price was reacting multiple times, but then it just became super, super, super messy. At this point, I would discard this zone. This is not a proper zone. Same exact concept over here. You can see the price has reacted multiple times, but then again, the price becomes really sloppy as the price action unfolds in this area. This next area over here, yes, the price action reacted multiple times, but then at the end, it just became very, very, very sloppy. I wouldn't really draw the zone. I really wouldn't have too much confidence in this zone either. So it's super important that you don't try to make sloppy zones magically work. If the zone is not clean, I would rather just avoid it and move on to another chart or move on to a different zone. Now, the fourth criteria in identifying proper support and resistance areas is finding areas where the price has reacted at as both support and resistance, or in other words, where price action has reacted both sides, from the top and from the bottom. Since we're on GBP NZD already, might as well give you that example right here as well. So notice this middle zone over here, it reacted on both sides. Right now, it was acting as a resistance, 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 resistance. And as the price breached it, and then at one point, it started acting as a support, support, support. And as that price breached it again, it then started acting as a resistance, And as the price pierced it again, started acting as a support, support, and yet another support. This is a very strong zone where the price is reacting. And one little small pro tip I'll give you, which not a lot of people notice, this zone, if you pay attention, you'll notice it's at what's called a round number, at a whole number, at a psychological level. It's at 1.96000. What do you notice on this zone over here? 1.98000. What do you notice on this one over here? 1.88000. And by the way, guys, if you're liking this content and if you are finding this valuable, if you're finding these little nuggets that I'm sharing with you valuable, then feel free to drop a like, because it really truly helps this channel, really motivates me to continue making free content just like this. And all around, it'll help YouTube spread these videos to the people who need to see them. Brand new traders, traders who are on their journey looking to become profitable so they can eventually quit the rat race and start trading full time. So if you do find this valuable, drop a like and leave a comment down below letting me know that if this was helpful for you or not. That being said, let's talk about another example of these support and resistance areas. We can go to Euro AUD. We are currently on the daily time frame, and here is a clear zone where the market has reacted as a support and resistance area both. Yes, there's multiple support and resistance areas like down here, but since we're on criteria number 4, let's talk about this one specifically. So notice this area right over here. And again, what am I doing? I'm scanning the market, the chart with my eyes to identify where I need to start this zone. This would be the area where I need to start the zone, drag it down, capture all the wicks as possible, and spread this out all the way to the right. This zone, just like the last one, is reacting at support areas, and also resistance areas, and also support areas. This is a very, very, very strong zone in order to enter your possible future trades. Now let's talk about criteria number 5, and this is finding and identifying areas or zones where the market has dramatically moved away from these areas multiple times. So if you find areas in the market where the price has drastically moved away quickly, I would mark these as zones of support and resistance. Let's go ahead and give you an example. We can go to NZD USD. Okay, so right here in the current market, this zone right here, notice I'm trying to capture as much as the wicks as possible while trying to avoid as much of the bodies of the candles as possible. Notice whenever the price approached this area, it violently reacted. Second time, it completely plummeted. The next time, it went up and completely plummeted. The next time it went up, same exact thing. It dramatically moved far away from this zone. Right now, I'm currently on the daily time frame. Let me go ahead and move into a smaller time frame. We could do the 1 hour time frame just to kind of show you how drastic these moves were. Notice it plummeted straight down. Notice it wicked up, touched the top of the zone, literally within that 1 hour, went all the way up. And then I'll zoom in a little bit closer, you can kind of see, went all the way up, reacted perfectly at this zone, went all the way back down, and ended right here in the middle while perfectly respecting this zone. And what happened again in the future? Same exact concept. Next time it approached, wicked up, landed within the zone, plummeted all the way back down. And this most recent time here, same exact thing. Went up, reacted, went up, and reacted all the way down. This is an example of the market violently reacting at a specific area. Now let's talk about criteria number 6, and this is finding and identifying areas where these support and resistance zones were recently created or recently respected. What do I mean by this? What I mean is if you find areas or zones somewhere in the past, while these zones are effective, you're able to find more effective zones the closer that you are to the current time. So you find zones that are being respected or have been created recently, those have more weight, those have more power than zones that have been created in the past. Why? It's because more people are looking, more smart money, more professional educated traders are looking at the recent zones as opposed to zones that were created years and years ago somewhere in the past. Now, let me go ahead and give you an example. So right now we are currently looking at Euro JPY. We're on the 1 hour chart. So right here, this would be a zone that is recently created and recently respected. This would also be a zone that is recently created and then also recently respected. Let's talk about a zone that was created somewhere in the past that isn't really respected too much in the current time. And that would be right over here. So creating this zone, at one point it was respected, but then you can see the price action has been disrespecting that zone multiple times. So what has more weight? These zones that have been created recently or this zone that has been created way in the past. So if you're ever debating between which zone that the price might react at, give a higher probability, give a higher weight of importance on zones that have been created or respected in the more recent price action rather than zones that have been created in the past. And one thing I do have to let you know, because some people that are watching this video are new, just know that trading is a game all about probabilities. Will the recent zones be respected more often than the older ones? 100% of the time? No, but more often than not, these recent zones are respected more than the older previous zones. And the day that you can accept the fact that trading is all about probabilities, all about maximizing your chances of getting the trades right and minimizing the chances of you getting the trade wrong, that will be the day where you will start trading in peace. Now, those are the 6 criteria that we use in order to find the highest probability areas of support and resistance of where the market might react in the future so we can enter those high probability trades. Now, a very important note is the fact that you don't need to have all 6 criteria, all 6 of those check marked in order to find a specific support and resistance area. Just know the more of those that you check off, the higher probability chance it has of working. Now, I'm going to put all of this together, everything that we learned today, and draw some zones on this chart right here. So let's talk about the first zone. First zone would look something like this. The next cleanest zone I see would be right here. The next cleanest zone I see would be right here. And the next cleanest zone I see would be right here. Now I'm going to label these A, B, C, and D. And I actually have a challenge for you. I want you to go in the comment section down below and tell me all of the criteria that zone A fits, all of the 6 criteria that zone B fits, and all of the criteria that zone C fits. Then also tell me all of the criteria that zone D fits. And remember, all of these zones might not have all 6 criteria. Just tell me as many of the criteria 1 through 6, which of those criteria each of these zones fit. So go to the comment section, A, B, C, and D. Tell me which of the 6 criteria do all of these zones fit. That being said, I hope this training was truly enjoyable for you. Hope you learned something. And while you're down there, quickly tap the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you are already subscribed, be sure to hit that little notification bell, because that way YouTube will actually notify you the instant I upload my next training. That being said, I hope you have a great trading week ahead. And by the way, if there's anyone that you know that could find this information useful, feel free to share this video to them, share this video in your groups, and let's go ahead and all grow and all learn. And I'll see you guys at the top. Take care, guys.